I love watching Sean Connery, but his accent, that ain't Russian. The Hunt for Red October, released in March of 1990, runs for 2 hours and 14 minutes and was directed by John McTiernan, starring Sean Connery, Alec Baldwin, Sam Neill, and Scott Glenn. Also starring James Earl Jones, Tim Curry, Courtney B. Lance, and Stellan Skarsgård. That guy. Production budget of 30 million, a domestic take of 122 million, an international total of 78 million, for a worldwide taking of over $200 million. This results in a tidy little profit of 170 million. Characters. Well, start off, we've got Marco Ramius, the stoic, dour, master strategist, master tactician of all things naval warfare. He's the very best the Russians have. He's also defecting, which, is a bit of a problem. And that's what kicks off the whole movie. Connery looks the part. He acts the part. He behaves perfectly for this character. He's got such an on-screen presence. Even when he's not saying anything, he's just got this persona, this aura of power about him. Except for that accent. I mean, I love his accent. Unless he's trying to be Russian. To be fair, it's not all the time. But every now and then you've got this very definite "ooh," and it just stands out like a lot. They have Alec Baldwin playing Jack Ryan. He does a good job. It's Jack Ryan running around as an analyst and a novelist and a research guy for the CIA. And he's coming up with all the ideas. He's got these insights into Ramius. He's a little bland, but it's Alec Baldwin versus Sean Connery. Connery's always going to be much more memorable, much more forceful on screen. But it's good value following Jack around in this story as he's convincing everyone that no, Ramius isn't attacking, he's defecting, really having to push that point home, really having to earn all these captains and admirals' trust to believe that what he's saying is true. Quite often you manage to feel for the guy because he's got his work cut out for him as the Russians keep stepping it up and making counterclaims, and really very convincing ones, because honestly, it makes more sense what they're saying than what he says. That's your main two characters, and to be honest, everyone else is just padding. Don't get me wrong, Neil is great as Borodin and Glenn is really good as Marcuso. But whilst they're very, very good characters, they're just support characters, high quality support characters, but make no mistake, this is the Ramius Ryan show. Both Borodin and Mancuso are very reserved. They're the careful, they're the thinkers, they're the strategists when it comes to this. They're less likely to go and do something silly, unlike Ramius and Ryan, who are always doing something silly. Of the two, Mancuso has more depth. He's the one that you get more invested in than Borodin. But they're both good. Then you've got General Greer and Dr. Petrov. General Greer being the boss, the guy in charge of Jack Ryan, and the guy who's got his back. He's both financing it and delivering some political clout. He's the force that'll move the plan along even when no one else is really believing it. Petrov is your onboard conscience. He works very hard at being a very good guy. He's on the ship's side. He really wants the best for all the men. He's the doctor. He's also the guy that keeps bringing up logical objections to some of Ramius's commands. And everyone knows he's right, including Ramius, but Ramius overrules and pushes along anyway. You like Petrov, but you're definitely sure that this poor doctor's out of his depth. Depth in a submarine. Last two primary support characters are Jones and Tupolov. Last two support characters are Jones and Tupolov. Jones being the sonar guy on the American ship from working for Captain Mancuso. And he's really good. Very, very savvy, very smart kid. Brilliant sonar operator. And he's the one that figures out that something's unusual and that they're tracking a very special ship, boat, sub. And Tupolev is really the main villain. In fact, the only villain in this movie. He represents the most determined and vicious Russian submarine commander chasing Ramius and out to kill him. And really pushes Ramius very, very hard. It only comes up a few times at the start of the movie, but then he comes back with a vengeance at the very end. Pretty much what you have in mind when you say the term Seawolf. So overall, I'll be giving the characters a 3. They are good characters. There's no real flaws in any of these characters. At worst, they're a little bland, a little bit background. But then again, no kidding, you're up against Alec Baldwin and Sean Connery. Nearly everyone else is background. They do their job They deliver the story, they move everything along, you feel for them, you identify with them, and none of them are irritating or throw you out of the movie. So good job all round. Story. Okay, this movie leaps straight into the political fun and games very early on. And also, this story is characterized, I think, by the term of showing, not telling. They will show you a lot of things happening, a lot of scenes, a lot of connected scenes, a lot of circumstances, people's reactions, people's interactions, and not tell you what's going on. They'll give you nothing to work with. You have to start putting it together yourself, and then later on, maybe a couple of scenes later, or maybe even one whole act later, they'll connect the dots for you when other people are talking about it. The exposition that happens in this movie is, well, thin and spread out. It's essential, it's intricate, but they don't just give it to you. You've got to really think about it. As I said, this is a slow boil story. It takes a while to warm up. Not till about mid-second act does it really kick off. Funnily enough, in contrast, the actual hunting for the Red October is happening within, the first 10 minutes. It just takes a while for the characters in the story to catch up the scenario. And when everyone's finally on board with what's actually going on, what they've actually discovered here, watching the American response ramp up and the Russian response ramp up quite quickly is very realistic. And both sides kind of like escalating but not wanting to start a war. But at the same time, getting close to it. In fact, there's a couple of things in the movie that is like this close to starting a massive ocean battle. And the story itself is underwater cat and mouse. It's a chase. Red October's on the run. The entire Russian fleet is chasing them, and the Americans are hunting them as well. Well, Ryan and those he manages to convince are wanting to help him defect. Everyone else believes that he's out to do a rogue attack on the United States and are so trying to sink him. As a result, you've got some very tense close calls, and don't forget that Ramius has only told his executive officers. The only people involved in defection are his immediate officers. All the lesser officers and all the crew, they don't know what's going on. They think they're on the training exercise that's getting out of control. So you've got tension at every direction, all piling onto Ramius, and it's great. And the last thing I found really interesting about this story is you end up with the two subs meeting. You have Ramius making contact with the sub that Ryan's on, and they have a little Morse code conversation. And that's the culmination of this hunt and chase, them meeting. And that doesn't happen at the very end. That pretty much happens at the start of the third act almost. It feels like that. So the culmination, the actual focal point of the story is 20 minutes before the movie ends. Everything else after that is just the fallout from their actions. And I loved it. The very last sequence of the main plot line is a little action movie-ish. It's a little under siegey. You don't really buy into Jack Ryan as an action star, but that's okay because he doesn't believe he's an action star either. He really isn't here to do anything actiony. He's here to talk. But hey, it's the end of a movie and it works quite well. Overall, I'll be giving story a 3. I really quite enjoyed myself here. This is a good story. It's a little slow in places, but it kind of needs to be. It doesn't really speed up that much, and again, it really shouldn't, I suppose. There are no real negatives about this story at all. I had a good time. I'm not going to call it easy to follow. It makes you think. But I enjoyed that as well anyway. So yeah, story. That's a 3. Look and feel. Okay, this movie looks and feels and sounds authentic. We'll start with the sound. We'll start with the fact that all the radio chatter, all the military lingo, dialogue, carry-on, all the bits surrounding this major military operation and all the terminology and their orders and discussions and all that sort of stuff sounds real, sounds believable, sounds legitimate. Once again, I chuck in a disclaimer. I've got no idea how it's meant to sound. It could be complete gobbledygook. It could make no sense at all, but that's not the point. The point is, as a viewer, you buy into it and you believe it. Or the audio effects and the Foley work and everything like that. And the musical score, it all works really, really well. It goes dead quiet and calm when it really should. And then it gets all full on and action orientated, alarms going off and bells and whistles and explosions and dramatic music when it should too. So, like I said, perfect. It all knits together really nicely. Especially when I've got the external views of the submarines. So there's a couple of times where they're just sitting right next to each other and it's all quiet in the ocean. And all you've got is a deep ambient rumble of, the sea. And the very basic sounds and the subtle noises. The whole scenario builds up really nicely. Gives you a lot of tension for ends up being very little happening. As for all the sets and all the props and all that sort of stuff, very rarely do you think, oh, that's a set. It just doesn't happen. You buy into the fact that this is a cramped, confined submarine. And you're on board a naval vessel. You're on board a ship. You're back at HQ. You're in someone's office. You're in a boardroom. You never think, oh, wonder what that stage was made out of. Or I wonder where they filmed that. You're too busy. You're too busy being engrossed in this movie. You totally buy into everything you see. And I think there's a lot to do with the camera work in this. There is so much camera work that's very close, very cramped, extreme angles from the ground up or overhead or right up beside someone. And quite often the actor's head isn't even fully in frame. They cut off on corners and stuff because it makes it feel cramped. As a submarine is cramped, I imagine. I imagine there's very little room on a sub, and that's what it feels like. And that was very, very effective. And the submarine stuff just looks cool. I really did like the fact that Tupolov's sub is all red lit and angry and evil and just close looking. Whereas the Red October looks more like a Star Trek bridge. It's silvers and dark colors, but it's all very clean, very shiny, very, very new. Then the American submarine looks dark greens and grays and very, very American military. Hard edges and clean colors and all that sort of thing. So they really gave each boat its own personality. In fact, you could probably identify each boat without having any crew on board. Uniforms, weapons, aircraft, military support, the whole thing looks good. You are never pulled out of the movie by any of that stuff. What might pull you out just a little bit is the CGI. Remember everyone, this is 1990. CGI is never going to be that good. The special effects, for what they are, however, are quite effective. If they're using CGI and they're using models and they're using special effects plates or anything like that, it's usually in the dark or underwater, which is also quite dark. So all the black edging, all the things blurring and blending into each other, it's not a problem. You can hide all manner of stuff doing that. And it's worked very effectively. Once or twice, they do use some effects that stand out. You go, all right, that's computer generated. All right, that's an overlay. Yeah, all right, green screen work is there. It doesn't really bother you that they do that because it kind of fits the scene. And you are aware for this whole movie of when it's been made. I suppose the last thing I want to mention that really sells it is the lighting effects. They really go to town on that. And it's a submarine. They can have some great time with shadows and harsh lighting. Really strong bright lights. Then the angry softer reds. And then the blues and the bright colors illuminated from all around the place. Get some really good reflections. Very good shadows on the faces. All that sort of stuff. They're chucking steam effects here and there and everywhere else as well. Because, you know, submarines, they take a bit of damage. Everything shakes and the lights are flashing and steam vents are going. It's like a low-tech Star Trek bridge. Really is a lot of fun. And again, you buy into it. The look and feel of this movie is particularly good. I'll be giving it a 3.25. Despite the occasionally hinky special effects, it doesn't matter. Everything else sells itself so well. Script and dialogue. Well, I've already mentioned that all the military chatter and carry on sounds great and it's delivered very, very well. It's delivered like a bunch of professionals who are very used to saying these words. There's no stilted presentation. The script is tight. It's very controlled. Not a lot of free running in the script, guys. There's very, very little, if any, improv, I imagine. The script also doesn't waste words. If it doesn't need to be said, it isn't said. They much prefer to just have it happen in front of you than tell you all about it. And all the lines are delivered with such conviction, with such good acting. It really is a pleasure to watch and listen to. There are 3 scenes in particular that are very nicely done. One is a debriefing in a White House boardroom with all these generals sitting around and this American ambassador and poor Ryan, short notice, up the front delivering. And it is well done. It shows the way they're all thinking. It gets everyone's character across. Next favorite part is when there's back and forwards between the 2 subs. When Ramius is communicating with Mancuso's ship, boat, submarine. Mancuso is communicating back and you got this discussion and Ramius is looking stunned that it's actually happening. It's actually working. And Mancuso is very dubious on everything that's going on and Ryan's just excited to be right. And that whole thing, that little back and forwards between the 2 boats, Very nicely done. I really enjoyed that carry on. And the other fun bit is every time they jump back to the ambassador's office, where you got the Russian ambassador and the American diplomat dude doing their thing. That just felt nice. As you know, the American knows that the Russian is lying and is leading him on, and you know the Russian is not telling everything he knows and trying to lead on the American. That's fun to watch. Oh, one more very cool thing. You got Ramius and the political officer having a conversation in Russian, and as the political officer is reading from some book, it zooms in on his lips, and then he switches from Russian to English, and it pans back out again, letting the audience know, oh, we're going to let you listen in on English. They're not speaking English, they're still speaking Russian, but hey, just for you, we'll translate. I thought that was extremely effective. It's old school, but very, very effective. Script and dialogue gets an easy 3. It is, much I've just said before, very effective. It's a well done script and no real holes in it. Aside from that Russian-Scottish accent. I know why they got Sean Connery in. He looks perfect and he's got such a presence. But that accent, really. Fun factor. Hey, I had a good time with this. Straight up. Fun factor. 3. It's tense, it's exciting, it's well written, it's engrossing, you're invested in everyone, you like all the characters, and the characters you're not meant to like, you don't like, so it does its job there too. At no stage are you bored, even when technically it's a slow moment, and technically it's quite a boring topic or thing that they're covering, you don't care, because you want to know how, you want to know why, you want to know what's going on. And I think the key to that is a lot of the showing and not telling it first. As I said, very happy to give this a 3. Final score. Add these all up and you get yourself a 15.25. This is a good time. This is slightly better than a good time. I really enjoyed myself, honestly. Every time I've watched this movie, I've enjoyed myself, and I've watched this movie quite a few times. Would I recommend it? Yes, I do. I think it's been about 6 years since I saw this, maybe more, 8 years since I saw this last. And you know what? It still gave me some surprises and I had no problems. So there's my review for this movie. Have you seen it before? Did you enjoy it as well? What did you think of it? Please comment down below and let me know what you thought. And as usual, please like and subscribe and share my review around. And above all else, I hope you're having a very good week and that you find some time to go and watch a movie.